Clara Grace Thornton pressed her youngest daughter against her chest and whispered a lie. "Everything will be fine, baby. Mama promises." But her hands were shaking. 6 children, 6 hungry mouths, and a stranger waiting at the end of this train, a man who'd paid for 1 bride, but was about to receive 7 souls instead. She hadn't told him. God forgive her, she hadn't told him about the children. The train whistle screamed. Clara closed her eyes and prayed for the first time in months. Not for love, just for mercy. This is their story. Stay until the very end and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this journey has traveled. Subscribe if you haven't already. You won't want to miss what happens next. The train lurched. Clara's stomach lurched with it. "Mama, I'm hungry." Willie tugged at her sleeve, his 7-year-old face pinched and pale. Behind him, Tommy stood rigid, arms crossed, trying to look like a man at 11 years old. Maggie had her nose in the same worn book she'd been reading for 3 days. Sarah clung to Clara's skirt, silent as she'd been since the funeral. Little Jamie slept against Tommy's shoulder, thumb in his mouth. And Ruth, baby Ruth, 18 months old, fussed against Clara's chest, too tired to cry properly anymore. 6 children, 6 reasons she'd done the unthinkable. "Soon," Clara whispered to Willie. "We'll eat soon." Tommy's jaw tightened. "You said that in Omaha. You said that in Cheyenne." "Tommy. And you still haven't told him." His voice dropped low, meant only for her. "Have you?" It wasn't a question. Clara looked away, unable to meet her son's accusing eyes. The boy knew. He'd read the advertisement over her shoulder back in Pennsylvania, seen the words she'd carefully written in response, Widow 32. Educated, hard-working, seeks honest man willing to provide home in exchange for companionship and labor. No mention of children, not one. "What's he gonna do, Ma?" Tommy pressed. "When he sees all of us?" "I don't know." The words fell from her lips like stones. The train slowed. Through the grimy window, Clara caught glimpses of a small frontier town, wooden buildings, muddy streets, mountains rising in the distance. Willow Springs, Wyoming. The end of the line. The end of running. "Mama?" Maggie looked up from her book, 9 years old, but somehow ancient. "What if he's mean?" Clara forced her voice steady. "Then we'll manage. We always manage. Like we managed when Grandpa Thornton threw us out." Tommy's voice cracked with bitterness. "Like we managed sleeping in that church basement for 3 weeks." "Thomas." Clara's tone sharpened. "Enough." The train groaned to a stop. Around them, passengers gathered belongings, shuffled toward exits. Clara didn't move. Couldn't move. Her legs had turned to water, her heart to lead. "Ma." Tommy stepped closer, and for a moment she saw his father in his face, Samuel before the mine collapse, before everything. "I'll protect them. If he tries anything, You'll do nothing." Clara gripped his arm. "You'll be polite. You'll be quiet. And you'll let me handle this. But promise me, Tommy." He hesitated, then nodded. Clara stood. Her legs trembled but held. She adjusted Ruth on her hip, took Sarah's hand, and shepherded her family toward the door. The platform was chaos, people shouting, horses, stamping, dust swirling. Clara squinted against the harsh afternoon light, searching faces. Which one was he? The grizzled man by the freight cart, the heavy fellow in the bowler hat, the young cowboy picking his teeth. "Mrs. Thornton." The voice came from behind her, low, rough, hesitant. Clara turned. He was tall. That was her first thought. Taller than Samuel had been, with broad shoulders and work-hardened hands. His face was weathered by sun and wind, not handsome exactly, but strong, honest. Dark hair touched with gray at the temples, and his eyes, pale blue, like winter sky, held something she hadn't expected. Uncertainty. "I'm Jacob Colton." He twisted his hat in his hands. I'm pleased to..." He stopped. His eyes had moved past her, to Tommy standing rigid with suspicion. to Maggie clutching her book like a shield, to Willie already fidgeting, to Sarah half hidden behind Clara's skirts, to Jamie rubbing sleepy eyes, to baby Ruth fussing in Clara's arms. Jacob Colton stared. Clara's heart stopped. Here it comes, she thought. The anger, the rejection, the slamming door. Jacob's voice trailed off. He blinked, looked at Clara, back at the children, back at Clara. You didn't mention... He swallowed hard. In your letter, you didn't say, I know. Clara's voice came out steady, though her insides were crumbling. I know I didn't. Silence stretched between them. Tommy stepped forward. We can leave. Find somewhere else. We don't need... Tommy. Clara's hand shot out, stopping him. Quiet! Jacob hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. His face was unreadable, carved from the same stone as the mountains behind him. Clara made herself stand straight. Meet his eyes. She'd faced worse than this. She'd faced Samuel's family spitting at her. She'd faced nights with nothing to feed her children. She'd faced the world's cruelty again and again. One more rejection wouldn't kill her. I lied, she said flatly. I let you believe I was alone. I did it because I was desperate. Because my children were starving. Because I had no other choice. Her voice hardened. But I won't apologize for wanting to save them. If you want to put us back on that train, I'll understand. But don't expect me to beg. Jacob stared at her, then at the children. Baby Ruth chose that moment to let out a wail, hungry, tired, miserable. Something shifted in Jacob's face. He stepped forward, slowly, carefully, like approaching a spooked animal. Can I? He gestured awkwardly toward Ruth. Clara blinked. What? The little one. She sounds hungry. Can I hold her? While you gather the others. Clara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This wasn't right. Men didn't offer to hold screaming babies. Men turned their backs. Men slammed doors. Men, ma'am. Jacob's voice gentled. You look about ready to fall over. Let me help. Before Clara could protest, he'd lifted Ruth from her arms. The movement was careful, practiced a man who'd held babies before. Ruth blinked up at this stranger, her cries dying to confused hiccups. There now, Jacob murmured, settling her against his shoulder. That's better, ain't it? He looked at Clara, really looked at her, the dark circles under her eyes, the worn dress barely holding together the desperate thinness of her face. When's the last time you ate? He asked quietly. Clara's throat tightened. The children ate yesterday. I asked about you. She couldn't answer, couldn't remember. Jacob nodded slowly. All right. We got a wagon over there. Room for everyone. The ranch is about an hour's ride, I'll explain on the way. What's what? He paused. I ain't gonna pretend I'm not surprised. I am. But... He looked down at Ruth, who'd grabbed a fistful of his shirt and was trying to put it in her mouth. But I reckon we can figure this out, one step at a time. Tommy stepped forward, suspicious. Why, you don't owe us nothing. She lied to you. Tommy, Clara hissed. But Jacob met the boy's eyes directly, man to man. You're right. She did lie. And yeah, I could put you all back on that train. Send you back to wherever you came from. He shifted Ruth to his other arm. That what you want? Tommy faltered. I know. But... Then let's go get some food in you. We can argue about the rest later. He turned and started walking toward a wagon hitched nearby. Clara stood frozen. Around her, her children looked up with questions in their eyes. Maggie, curious. Willie, hopeful. Sarah, terrified. Tommy, suspicious. Mama? Jamie tugged her hand. Is he our new papa? Clara looked at Jacob's retreating back at her baby daughter, resting against his shoulder like she belonged there. I don't know, sweetheart. Her voice was barely a whisper. I don't know what he is. The wagon ride was silent. Jacob drove Ruth, now sleeping in a basket he'd produced from somewhere padded with his own jacket. Clara sat beside him rigid, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Behind them, the children huddled together. Tommy, watchful Maggie, making notes in her head. Willie finally quiet for once. The landscape rolled past. Mountains and prairie, endless sky, a river cutting silver through green grassland. It's beautiful. The words escaped Clara before she could stop them. Jacob glanced at her. Gets more so. The valley, I mean. Ranch is in a protected spot, mountains on 3 sides. Good grazing, good water. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. My mother lives there too. Jacob continued, eyes on the horses. Ruth Senior, we call her. He hesitated. She's particular. Might take her a while to warm up. Might never warm up, Clara translated. Might hate me on sight. Mr. Colton. Jake. Everyone calls me Jake. Jake. The name felt strange on her tongue. Why are you doing this? You could have walked away. Should have, probably. Jake was quiet for a long moment. The wagon creaked. Horses' hooves thudded on packed dirt. Had a wife once, he said finally. Elizabeth. Lost her 8 years ago. Childbirth. His voice stayed flat, careful. Lost the baby, too. Clara's breath caught. After that, I just worked. Built the ranch, added cattle, kept busy. Figured that was enough. He shook his head. It ain't. Found that out slow, but I found it out. He looked at her, then really looked. I ain't gonna lie to you, ma'am. I sent for a wife hoping for a partner. Someone to share the work. Maybe eventually a family. He glanced back at the children. Didn't expect the family to come pre-made. But, he cut her off. I've spent 8 years building something for nobody. Watching other men come home to wives and children while I come home to empty rooms. And now I got a wagon full of young'uns who need food and shelter and a woman who looks like she's been carrying the weight of the world alone. His hands tightened on the reins. I ain't a cruel man, Mrs. Thornton. Can't promise I'll be any good at this, at any of it. But I ain't cruel. Clara felt something crack inside her chest. Something she'd kept frozen for months, maybe years. Clara, she whispered. My name is Clara. Clara. He nodded. Well, Clara, let's just take this one day at a time. See if we can figure out how to make this work. Behind them, Tommy's voice rose sharp. You think you can just buy yourself a family, that's what this is. Tommy? Clara twisted around, but Jake held up a hand. No, let the boy speak. He's got a right. Tommy's chin jutted out. You paid for a wife, not for us. We ain't part of the bargain. You're right. Tommy blinked. I what? You're right, Jake repeated calmly. You ain't part of any bargain? Your ma didn't tell me about you, so there ain't no deal that covers you. He met the boy's eyes steadily. So I reckon that means I'm choosing this, all of you. Not 'cause I have to, 'cause I want to. Tommy stared. Why would you want 6 kids you never met? Jake was quiet for a moment. Because I know what it's like to be alone, and I'm tired of it. Simple. Direct. And because your baby sister there stopped crying the minute I picked her up. First time in months, something needed me that wasn't a horse or a cow. He turned back to the horses. You don't have to trust me, son. Don't have to like me either. Just give me a chance to show you what kind of man I am. That's all I'm asking. Tommy opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his mother. Clara gave him a small nod. Tommy sat back, silent. But something in his posture had shifted just slightly. The ranch appeared as they crested a hill. The main house was solid log construction, 2 stories with a wide porch and smoke curling from the chimney. Nearby stood a large barn stables, several outbuildings. Corrals held horses that raised their heads at the wagon's approach. Beyond it all, spread the valley green and golden, the river cutting through mountains, standing guard. Welcome to Colton Creek, Jake said quietly. Clara couldn't speak. After the cramped tenement in Pennsylvania, after months of homeless wandering, this seemed impossible. Unreal. "It's so big," Willie breathed. "Bigger'n I can handle alone," Jake admitted. "That's part of why I needed help." The wagon rolled into the yard and stopped. Before Jake could move, the front door swung open. A woman emerged. Late 60s iron-gray hair pulled back severely, spine straight as a rifle. Her eyes, the same pale blue as Jake's, swept over the wagon and its passengers like a general surveying troops, and found them wanting. "Jacob." Her voice cut through the afternoon air. "What in God's name is this, Ma?" Jake climbed down from the wagon. "This is Mrs. Clara Thornton, and her children." "Her?" The woman stopped, counted. Her face went white, then red. "You can't be serious." "Ma, you sent for a wife, Jacob, not a—" She gestured at the wagon, unable to find words. "Not a circus." Clara felt her children shrink behind her. Willie whimpered. Sarah's grip on her skirt tightened painfully. Jake's jaw set hard. "They're staying." "Like hell they are. Jacob, look at them." 6 children. 6. "We don't have the resources, the space. We have 4 empty bedrooms and more food than 3 people can eat. We have resources." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point, Ma?" The old woman's eyes locked on Clara, and Clara saw it there. Not just surprise or disapproval, something deeper, something colder, fear. "She lied to you." Ruth Sr.'s voice dropped low, dangerous. "What kind of woman lies about having 6 children? What else is she lying about?" Clara felt her spine stiffen, found her voice. "Nothing else." She climbed down from the wagon, baby Ruth stirring in her basket. "I lied about the children because no man in his right mind would accept a widow with 6 mouths to feed. I lied because I was desperate, because I'd rather deceive a stranger than watch my children starve." She stepped forward, meeting the older woman's glare. "But I won't lie again, not to anyone here. I'm not looking for charity, Mrs. Colton. I'm looking for a chance, to work, to contribute, to give my children a future." Ruth Sr.'s eyes narrowed. "Pretty words." "I'm not trying to be pretty. I'm trying to survive." The 2 women stared at each other, one weathered by frontier hardship, the other worn by grief and struggle. Jake stepped between them. "Ma, enough. They're staying. We can discuss everything else later, but right now these children are hungry and tired, and they're staying." His mother's mouth pressed into a thin line. "You're making a mistake, Jacob." "Maybe. My mistake to make." She turned sharply and disappeared into the house. The door didn't quite slam, but it was close. Jake let out a long breath. "I'm sorry," he said to Clara. She'll come around. Eventually." Clara doubted that very much, but she said nothing. "Let's get you all inside. Get some food in you. We'll figure out sleeping arrangements after." The inside of the house was warm, clean, larger than Clara had expected. A big main room with kitchen and living area, a stone fireplace, a sturdy dining table. Doors led to other rooms, other spaces. Ruth Sr. was nowhere in sight. A blessing, Clara thought. Jake moved around the kitchen with surprising ease, pulling out bread cheese leftover stew that he set to warm. The children gathered at the table, eyeing the food with desperate hunger. "Go ahead," Jake said. "Don't wait on ceremony." They didn't. Willie fell on the bread like he hadn't eaten in weeks, which Clara realized wasn't far from true. Even Tommy, despite his suspicion, couldn't resist the stew. Baby Ruth woke crying, and before Clara could reach her, Jake had lifted the basket. "I've got her. You eat." "Mr. Colton, Jake, you can barely stand." His voice was gentle but firm. "When's the last time you put yourself first?" Clara couldn't remember. She ate. The food was simple but plentiful, and she felt strength returning with each bite. Around her, her children were transforming color, coming back to cheeks, light returning to eyes. "This is really good," Maggie said solemnly. Did you make it? Mrs. Chen in town made the bread. I did the stew. Jake jiggled Ruth on his knee, making the baby gurgle. I ain't much of a cook, but I manage. Our ma's a good cook, Willie announced through a mouthful of cheese. She used to make apple pie on Sundays. That's so. The best pie. Jamie agreed sleepily, already half dozing against Tommy's shoulder. Clara watched Jake with her baby, watched how careful he was, how natural. This man who'd lost a child of his own, who'd spent 8 years alone, holding her daughter like she was precious. It didn't make sense. Why? The word escaped before she could stop it. Jake looked up. Why are you being kind? Clara's voice cracked. Why aren't you angry? Jake was quiet for a moment, still bouncing Ruth. I was angry. On the platform when I first saw all of them. Felt like I'd been played for a fool. You were played for a fool. Maybe. He looked at her and something raw flickered in his eyes. But then I saw your face, the way you were bracing yourself, like you expected me to hit you. Clara flinched. And I thought about what kind of man makes a woman expect that, what you must have been through to look at a stranger that way. He shook his head. I ain't that man, Clara. Whatever else I am, I ain't that. The children had grown quiet, listening. I ain't saying this'll be easy, Jake continued. It won't. My mother's gonna fight me on this. The ranch is hard work. Winter's comin', and it's gonna be brutal. He met her eyes. But I'm willing to try if you are. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, refused to let them fall. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to be a wife again. I don't know if I can trust. Then don't, not yet. Jake's voice was steady. Trust takes time. I ain't asking for it today. I'm asking for a chance. Baby Ruth grabbed his finger and shoved it in her mouth. Jake laughed a rusty sound like he hadn't used it in years. Your daughter's got strong opinions about negotiations. Something broke loose in Clara's chest. A laugh wet, exhausted, half hysterical. She's stubborn. All my children are. Good. Jake smiled. Stubborn survives. Night fell over Colton Creek Ranch. Clara stood at the window of the room Jake had given her, a proper bedroom with a real bed, a dresser, a washstand. The children were distributed through the houseboys, in one room, older girls in another, baby Ruth's basket beside Clara's bed. It was too much, too fast. Her head spun, trying to make sense of it all. A knock at the door. Clara? Jake's voice muffled. You decent... She opened the door. He stood in the hallway, awkward, holding something in his hands. Found this in the attic. Thought the baby might need it. A cradle, old but solid, carved with simple designs. It was mine, Jake said quietly. My mother saved it. Don't know why I told her to burn it after Elizabeth. He didn't finish. Clara touched the smooth wood. Jake, I can't. It's just sitting in the dark collecting dust. Might as well be used. She looked up at him, this complicated man who kept doing unexpected things. Why do you keep surprising me? Jake's mouth quirked. Maybe because you expect the worst, and I've spent 8 years trying to be better than the worst. He set the cradle down inside her door. Sleep well, Clara. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. He turned to go. Jake. He stopped. Thank you. The words felt inadequate. For all of it. He nodded once, then disappeared down the hallway. Clara closed the door, leaned against it, breathed. In the cradle's basket, Ruth made soft sounds. From down the hall, she could hear her children settling Tommy's low voice, telling Jamie a story. Sarah's rare giggle at something Maggie said. They were safe, fed, warm. For the first time in months, they were safe. Clara sank onto the bed. She'd lied to get here, deceived a good man. But looking around this room, this solid, warm, impossible room, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Whatever came next, whatever battles lay ahead with Jake's mother, with this new life, with her own battered heart, her children had a chance, and for now, that was enough. Downstairs, Jake sat alone by the dying fire. His mother had refused to come out of her room. The children were settled. Clara was resting. And he was sitting here in the dark trying to understand what he'd just done. 6 children, a woman who'd lied to him, a mother who thought he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. He thought about Elizabeth, about the child he'd never gotten to hold, about 8 years of emptiness of building walls around a heart that had nowhere to go. And then he thought about Clara's face on that platform, the way she'd braced for cruelty, the way she'd stood her ground anyway. I won't apologize for wanting to save them. No, she wouldn't. And somehow, that made him respect her more, not less. Jake leaned back, staring at the embers. He didn't know if this would work. Didn't know if he could be a husband, a father, whatever this situation required. Didn't know if his mother would ever accept it, if Clara would ever trust him, if those children would ever see him as anything other than a stranger who'd bought their mother. But for the first time in 8 years, the house didn't feel empty. And for now, that was enough. Outside, the Montana wind whispered through the valley, carrying the first bitter promise of winter. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howled. And in a house full of strangers learning to become family, everyone finally slept. Morning came hard and fast. Clara woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and baby Ruth fussing in her cradle. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling was wrong. The bed was too soft. The air smelled like pine and wood smoke instead of coal and garbage. Then memory flooded back. The train. Jake Colton. 6 children scattered through a stranger's house. She sat up, every muscle aching from weeks of travel. Ruth's cries were escalating, and Clara lifted her quickly, pressing the baby to her chest. "Shh, sweet girl, Mama's here." From somewhere in the house, she heard voices. Her children's voices, and another one she didn't recognize. High and sharp and angry. Ruth Sr. Clara's stomach clenched. She dressed quickly in the same worn dress she'd arrived in, the only one that still fit properly after months of barely eating. She pinned her hair back with shaking fingers, settled Ruth on her hip, and opened the door. The voices grew clearer as she walked down the hallway. "I don't care what my son promised you. This is my house too, and I won't have..." "Won't have what exactly?" Tommy's voice cut in defiant. "Won't have us eating your food, using your space. We ain't beggars, ma'am. We're here because your son asked us to be." Clara quickened her pace. She reached the main room to find Tommy standing toe-to-toe with Ruth Sr., his 11-year-old body taut with protective fury. Behind him, the other children huddled near the fireplace. Maggie had pulled Sarah and Jamie behind her. Willie stood slightly apart, fists clenched, ready to fight. Jake was nowhere in sight. "Tommy." Clara's voice came out steady, despite her racing heart. "Step back." "Ma," she said. "I heard what she said. Step back." Tommy hesitated, then moved to join his siblings. His eyes stayed locked on Ruth Sr., full of warning. Clara faced the older woman. Ruth Sr.'s face was tight with anger, but underneath it Clara saw something else. The same fear she'd glimpsed yesterday. "Mrs. Colton?" Clara kept her voice calm. "I understand this isn't what you expected. It isn't what any of us expected. But your son made a decision, and until he tells us otherwise, we're staying." "My son has lost his mind." "Maybe, but it's his mind to lose." Ruth Sr.'s eyes narrowed. "You think you're clever, don't you? Coming here with your sob story and your army of children, trapping him into something he never agreed to." "I didn't trap anyone. I gave him a choice. He chose this." "He chose out of pity, out of some misguided..." The front door opened. Jake stepped in, bringing cold air and the smell of horses. He stopped, taking in the scene. His mother's rigid posture. Clara standing her ground. The children clustered together like survivors of a shipwreck. "What's going on here?" Nobody spoke. Jake's jaw tightened. "Ma." "Jacob, I was simply explaining to your guest that this arrangement is temporary, that once you come to your senses, this arrangement is permanent." Jake's voice was quiet, but carried an edge Clara hadn't heard before. Clara and her children are staying. They're part of this ranch now. If you can't accept that, you're welcome to spend some time in town until you can. Ruth Sr.'s face went white. You would choose them over your own mother. I'm not choosing anyone over anyone. I'm telling you how it's going to be. Jake moved to stand beside Clara, not touching her but close enough to make his position clear. These children need a home. Clara needs a chance. And I need to stop living like I'm already dead. Something flickered across his mother's face. Pain, maybe, or recognition. Elizabeth wouldn't have wanted this, Ruth Sr. said quietly. Jake flinched like he'd been struck. Elizabeth. His voice dropped low, dangerous. Elizabeth would have been the first to welcome them. You know that as well as I do. She had more kindness in her little finger than... He stopped, breathed. We're not doing this, Ma. Not in front of the children. Ruth Sr.'s mouth pressed into a thin line. Without another word, she turned and walked out the back door, letting it slam behind her. Silence filled the room. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Jake, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause... You didn't cause anything. Jake ran a hand through his hair. She's been like this since Elizabeth died. Scared of losing anyone else. Scared of letting anyone new in. He looked at her. She'll come around. Just give her time. Clara nodded, though she doubted time would be enough. You kids hungry? Jake asked, his voice shifting to something lighter. I make a mean breakfast. Well, I make breakfast. Mean might be stretching it. Willie stepped forward eagerly. What kind of breakfast? Eggs? Bacon? Biscuits if I don't burn 'em. I can help. Maggie's voice was quiet but firm. I know how to cook. Ma taught me. Jake smiled. Well then, Miss Maggie, I'd be grateful for the help. Kitchen's that way. Clara watched her daughter follow Jake toward the stove, watched the tension slowly drain from her other children's shoulders. Tommy still stood rigid, watching Jake with suspicious eyes. He's not the enemy, Clara said softly, moving to his side. How do you know? I don't, not for certain. But I know he could have left us at that station. Could have sent us away last night. He didn't. That don't mean he's good. Just means he ain't bad yet. Clara touched her son's face. So young to be so hard. So determined to protect everyone. Then let's give him a chance to prove which one he is. Can you do that? For me? Tommy's jaw worked. If he hurts you, then we'll deal with it together. But let's not borrow trouble, Tommy. We've got enough of our own. Breakfast was better than Clara expected. Jake's biscuits were slightly burned on the bottom but edible. The eggs were good, the bacon crispy. The children ate like they hadn't seen food in weeks, which wasn't far from the truth. Jake watched them with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. Wonder maybe, or something closer to longing. After breakfast, he said, I'll show you around the ranch. Let you get your bearings. There's a lot to learn if you're going to live here. Can I see the horses? Willie asked through a mouthful of biscuit. Willie, don't talk with your mouth full, Clara said automatically. Can I see the horses, please, ma'am? Willie amended, spraying crumbs. Jake laughed, that rusty sound again, like a door that hadn't been opened in years. Yeah, son, you can see the horses. Son. The word hung in the air. Willie didn't seem to notice, but Tommy did. His eyes sharpened, tracking Jake's every move. After breakfast, true to his word, Jake led them outside. The morning was crisp and clear, frost still clinging to the grass in shadowed places. Clara carried Ruth, who blinked at the bright light with curious eyes. The main barn's there, Jake pointed. Horses, milk, cows, equipment. That smaller building's the chicken coop. Your job to collect eggs every morning if you want it. I want it, Jamie shouted, bouncing on his toes. Mine too. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, but it was the first word she'd spoken since arriving. Jake crouched down to her level. You like chickens, Miss Sarah? Sarah nodded, her thumb creeping toward her mouth. Well, they're gonna love you. Chickens appreciate a gentle hand, and you look like you got the gentlest hands in Wyoming. Sarah almost smiled. Almost. Jake straightened. Corral there is where we work the horses. The bunkhouse is for ranch hands, but it's just me and Silas these days. Silas McGraw, my foreman. He'll be back from town this afternoon. How much land do you have? Maggie asked, her analytical mind already working. About 3,000 acres, most of it grazing. We run cattle, mainly some horses for sale and breeding. 3,000 acres. Maggie's eyes went wide. That's enormous. It's a lot to manage. That's why I need help. Jake looked at Clara. All the help I can get. They spent the morning exploring. Jake showed them the river, warned them about the deep spots, showed them where the property lines ran, where the mountain lions had been spotted last spring. Showed them the root cellar stocked for winter, the smokehouse where meat hung curing. Clara watched her children come alive in ways she hadn't seen since Pennsylvania. Willie raced through the fields like a wild thing finally set free. Maggie peppered Jake with questions about cattle breeding and land management. Even Tommy's rigid posture began to soften as Jake explained the ranch's workings with patience and genuine interest. Only Sarah stayed close to Clara, her small hand wrapped tight around her mother's fingers. Clara understood. Some wounds took longer to heal. Around midday, a rider appeared on the ridge. Clara tensed, but Jake raised a hand in greeting. That's Silas. Told you he'd be back. The rider approached. Silas McGraw was older than Clara had expected, maybe 50, with a weathered face and shrewd eyes. He pulled his horse to a stop and looked over the assembled group with undisguised surprise. Well, boss. His voice was dry as dust. Looks like you've been busy. Silas, this is Mrs. Clara Thornton and her children. Jake's voice carried a note of warning. They're staying. Silas's eyebrows rose. He looked at Clara, at the children, back at Jake. That's so. That's so. For a long moment, Silas said nothing. Then he tipped his hat. Ma'am, welcome to Colton Creek. He looked at the boys. Either of you know how to ride? Tommy straightened. Some. Some ain't enough. You're gonna learn proper, or you're gonna break your neck. Silas dismounted. Come on then. Let's see what you're made of. Silas! Jake's voice held caution. Ain't gonna break 'em, boss. Just gonna see what we're working with. He looked at Clara. With your permission, ma'am. Clara hesitated. Looked at Tommy, who was practically vibrating with eagerness. At Willie, who was already running toward the corral. Be careful, she said. Silas nodded once and led the boys away. Jake watched them go. Silas is good with young'uns. Rough around the edges, but fair. He'll teach them right. He's been with you long. 20 years. Worked for my father before me. He's the reason this ranch survived after Elizabeth. He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Clara shifted Ruth to her other hip. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you send for a wife now? After 8 years. Jake was quiet for a long moment. They stood in the yard, the sounds of ranch life around them. Chickens clucking, horses stamping, Silas's gruff voice carrying from the corral. Last winter was bad, Jake said finally. Coldest in memory. Lost 20 head of cattle. Almost lost myself, truth be told. Caught pneumonia, nearly died. Clara's breath caught. Silas found me in the barn half frozen. Don't even remember how I got there. He dragged me back to the house, kept me alive. Jake's voice was distant, remembering. When I finally got better, I realized something. If I died out there, nobody would have mourned me. Not really. My mother would grieve, but she's been grieving for 8 years already. Silas would move on. The ranch would get sold. Everything I built would just disappear. He turned to look at her. I didn't want that. Didn't want to be forgotten. Didn't want to die alone in the snow like some old wolf who outlived his pack. His voice roughened. So I wrote that advertisement, looking for someone to share this life with, someone to make it mean something. And you got me." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. A widow with 6 children, and nothing to offer but trouble. "No." Jake stepped closer. "I got a woman who'd do anything to protect her family. Who'd lie and scheme and cross a continent if that's what it took. I got 6 children who need a home. I got exactly what I asked for, Clara. I just didn't know it until I saw you." Clara's eyes burned. She'd spent so long expecting cruelty that kindness felt like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I don't know how to be part of something. Samuel's family, they—" She stopped. Some things were still too raw to say. "Tell me." Jake's voice was gentle. "When you're ready. Tell me everything." Before she could respond, a shout came from the corral, Willie crowing with triumph. Clara turned to see him sitting atop a small pony, Silas holding the lead rope, Tommy watching with barely concealed envy. "Look, Ma, I'm riding. I'm really riding." Clara laughed. The sound surprised her. She hadn't laughed in so long she'd almost forgotten how. "I see you, Willie, hold on tight." Beside her, Jake was smiling. He's a natural, quick learner. He's a terror, but yes, he learns fast. They watched together. Silas patient, Willie ecstatic, Tommy trying so hard to be unimpressed and failing completely. "Thank you," Clara said softly. "For what?" "For this. For giving them this." She gestured at the corral, the ranch, the open sky. "I thought when Samuel died, I'd never see them happy again. I thought I'd failed them." "You didn't fail anyone." Jake's voice was firm. "You survived. You got them here. That's not failure, Clara. That's strength." She looked at him, this rough, gentle man who kept saying impossible things. "I want to believe you." "Then believe me. Or don't. Either way, I'm going to keep saying it until you do." The afternoon brought work. Jake showed Clara the house properly this time, explaining how things ran. The kitchen, the root cellar, the back porch where laundry was done. Ruth Sr. stayed conspicuously absent, locked in her room, her displeasure a living presence even through closed doors. "She'll come out when she's hungry," Jake said with forced casualness. "Always does." Clara wasn't so sure. The older woman's hostility felt deeper than simple resistance to change. There was history there, pain that had calcified into something harder. By evening, the children were exhausted. Willie had to be practically carried to bed, still talking about horses even as his eyes closed. Jamie was already asleep in Tommy's arms. Sarah had found a barn cat and refused to let it go, so Clara let her bring it inside, rules be damned. Maggie helped Clara settle the little ones, her 9-year-old competence, heartbreaking in its necessity. She'd had to grow up too fast, all of them had. "Ma," Maggie whispered as they tucked Sarah in, the cat curled against her chest. "Do you think we'll really get to stay?" "I think so, sweetheart." "Forever." Clara stroked her daughter's hair. "I don't know about forever. Nobody knows about forever. But for now, yes, we're staying. I like it here." Maggie's voice was small. "I like the mountains. I like that there's room to breathe." Clara kissed her forehead. "Me too, baby. Me too." She found Jake on the front porch after the children were settled. He sat on the steps staring out at the darkening valley, a cup of coffee in his hands. "Mind if I join you?" He shifted over. "Please." Clara sat wrapping her arms around herself against the evening chill. The sky was turning purple and orange, the mountains silhouetted against the dying light. "It's beautiful," she said. "Gets more so. Wait till the first snow. The whole valley turns to crystal. Samuel used to talk about going west." The words came out before she could stop them, before the mine, before everything. He'd say, "Clara, one day we're going to have land of our own, gonna raise cattle, raise kids, die, old and fat and happy." Jake was quiet, listening. He was a good man. Not perfect, but good. Worked hard. Loved the children. Loved me. Her voice cracked. Then the mine collapsed, and everything fell apart. What happened? After I mean. Clara's hands tightened in her lap. His family happened. The Thorntons. They'd never approved of me. I was a teacher's daughter, not good enough for their son. When Samuel died, they saw their chance. Their chance for what? To take everything. The house was in Samuel's name. They had lawyers' connections. Before I knew what was happening, they'd claimed it all. Said Samuel owed them money. Said I couldn't prove otherwise. Her voice hardened. They threw us out, Jake, me and 6 children, into the street, in November. Jake's jaw tightened. We stayed in a church basement for 3 weeks, then a boarding house until the money ran out. Then, she shook her head. I did things I'm not proud of. Begged, stole food, let men think. She stopped. I kept my children alive. That's all that matters. Clara. Jake's voice was rough with emotion. When I saw your advertisement, I thought this is it. This is my last chance. And I knew if I told the truth, if I said 6 children, nobody would want us, so I lied. She looked at him directly. I'm sorry for deceiving you, but I'm not sorry for doing whatever it took to save them. Jake set down his coffee cup, turned to face her fully. Do you know what I thought when I saw you on that platform? All those kids clustered around you like chicks around a hen? Clara shook her head. I thought that woman's been through hell, and she's still standing. His voice was steady. I thought that's the kind of strength this land needs. That's the kind of strength I need. Jake, I ain't gonna pretend this is gonna be easy. It won't be. My mother's gonna fight us every step. The winters are brutal. Ranch work is hard and dangerous and never-ending. He reached out, took her hand. His palm was rough, calloused, warm. But I meant what I said yesterday. I want to try. With all of you. Clara looked at their joined hands, felt something shift in her chest, something that had been frozen solid starting to thaw. I can't promise you anything, she whispered. I don't know if I can be what you need. I don't know if I can. I ain't asking for promises. I'm asking for today, just today. Jake squeezed her fingers. Tomorrow, we'll figure out tomorrow. A sound from behind them. Clara turned to see Tommy in the doorway, his face unreadable in the darkness. Ma, Jamie's crying. I think he had a nightmare. Clara stood quickly. I'll be right there. She looked back at Jake, something unspoken passing between them. Good night, Clara. Good night, Jake. She followed Tommy inside, heard the front door close behind her. Ma! Tommy's voice was low, urgent. What were you doing out there? Talking, just talking. He was holding your hand. Clara stopped, turned to face her son. In the dim hallway, he looked older than 11, harder. A boy who'd had to become a man too soon. Tommy, I know this is difficult. I know you're trying to protect us, but Jake isn't the enemy. How do you know? I don't, not for certain, but I have to trust someone eventually, or we'll never have a life. We'll just keep running until there's nowhere left to run. Tommy's jaw worked. Pa wouldn't like this. The words hit like a blow. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Your father is dead, Tommy. He's been dead for 2 years, and I've spent those 2 years doing everything I could to keep you all alive. Her voice shook. I'm tired. I'm so tired. And Jake is offering us a chance. A real chance. Will you please just let me try? Tommy stared at her. For a moment, he was just a boy again, small and scared and desperate for someone to make things okay. I miss him, Ma. His voice cracked. I miss Pa. Clara pulled him into her arms. He resisted for a moment, then collapsed against her, his thin shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I know, baby. I miss him too. She stroked his hair. But missing him doesn't mean we stop living. It doesn't mean we stop hoping for something better. What if Jake's just pretending? What if he turns out bad? Then we'll deal with it, together, like we've dealt with everything else. Clara held him tighter. But I don't think he's pretending, Tommy. I think he's lonely and broken and looking for the same thing we are. A family. A home. Tommy pulled back, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. I don't trust him yet. You don't have to. Not yet. Just don't fight me on this. Can you do that? A long pause. Then slowly, Tommy nodded. I'll try, Ma. For you. That's all I ask. From down the hall, Jamie's whimpering grew louder. Clara kissed Tommy's forehead and went to comfort her youngest son. Behind her, Tommy stood alone in the dark hallway, watching her go. 3 days passed. 3 days of learning the rhythm of the ranch. 3 days of meals together, work side by side, slow and careful, getting to know each other. 3 days of Ruth Sr.'s pointed absence, taking her meals in her room, emerging only when absolutely necessary. On the 4th morning, everything changed. Clara was in the kitchen, Ruth on her hip, when she heard shouting from outside. Men's voices, angry and urgent. Jake's voice rising above them. She ran to the porch. 3 riders had come into the yard. Men she didn't recognize, well-dressed, mounted on expensive horses. The leader was tall and imposing, with iron gray hair and cold eyes. Jake stood facing them, Silas at his side, tension radiating from every line of their bodies. I'm gonna ask you one more time, Morgan. The leader's voice carried clearly. Let's talk business, like civilized men. We got nothing to talk about, Beaumont. The answer's the same as it's been for 3 years. No. Beaumont. Clara recognized the name. Jake had mentioned him once. The banker. The land grabber. The man who'd been trying to buy out every small rancher in the valley. Now that's short-sighted. Beaumont leaned forward in his saddle. The railroad's coming through, right through this valley. You can either sell to me now for a fair price, or watch your land get seized when the government decides they need it. Government don't need my land. Railroad can go around. Can, but won't. Progress waits for no man, Morgan, not even stubborn fools. Clara felt Tommy appear beside her, felt his protective stance. That man's trouble, Tommy said quietly. I know. Jake's voice hardened. Get off my property, Beaumont. Take your threats somewhere else. Beaumont's cold gaze swept the yard, landed on Clara. On the children gathering behind her. Well, well. What's this Jake Morgan finally found himself a woman? His smile was predatory. And a ready-made family, no less. How economical. Clara felt ice slide down her spine. Don't. Jake's voice was deadly quiet. Don't look at her. Don't speak to her. Don't even think about her. Beaumont laughed. Protective already. That's touching. He tipped his hat mockingly. Ma'am, welcome to the valley. I hope you know what you've gotten yourself into. I know exactly what I've gotten into. Clara's voice came out steady, despite her racing heart. And I know snakes when I see them. Beaumont's smile froze. For a moment, something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Quite the spitfire you found, Morgan. I hope she doesn't get burned. He wheeled his horse. The other riders followed. Within moments, they disappeared over the ridge. Jake stood rigid, watching them go. Silas spat into the dirt. That man ain't gonna stop, boss. You know that. I know. Clara came down from the porch. Jake, who was that? What does he want? Jake turned to her, and she saw something in his face she hadn't seen before. Fear. That was Henry Beaumont. He owns half this county, wants to own it all. He's been trying to buy me out for years. And you've said no. Every time. This land was my father's. My grandfather's before that. I ain't selling to some eastern speculator who'll strip it bare and move on. He mentioned the railroad. Yeah. Jake ran a hand through his hair. That part's true. Railroad's coming through probably within the year. Beaumont's been buying up land along the planned route, planning to sell to the railroad at a premium. And your land is in the way. My land's got the best water rights in the valley. Whoever owns this land controls access to the river for miles around. Clara understood now. This wasn't just about land. It was about power. About who controlled the valley's future. What are you going to do? Jake looked at her, at the children clustered on the porch watching with worried eyes. Same thing I've always done, hold my ground. He paused. But Clara, you need to understand something. This situation just got more complicated. Beaumont knows about you now, about the children. He's not above using that. Using us how? Any way he can. That man's got no conscience, no limits. If he thinks threatening you will get me to sell... Jake's jaw tightened. I won't let that happen. But you need to know the risk you're taking by staying. Clara looked at her children, at this ranch that was starting to feel like home, at this man who'd shown them nothing but kindness. She thought about running, about packing up and disappearing before things got worse. Then she thought about all the running she'd already done, all the places she'd fled, the lives she'd left behind. We're staying. The words came out firm, final. We've run enough. If there's a fight coming, we'll face it together. Jake stared at her. Clara, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. She stepped closer. You took a chance on us, Jake. Took in 7 strangers without knowing what you were getting. The least we can do is stand with you. Something shifted in Jake's eyes. Something like hope, fragile and uncertain. You sure? I'm sure. Behind them, the front door opened. Ruth Sr. stepped onto the porch, her face set in hard lines. I heard, she said flatly. Beaumont was here. Ma, I don't want to. Quiet, Jacob. Ruth Sr.'s voice was sharp. I heard what that woman said. About staying. About fighting. She looked at Clara. For a long moment, the two women stared at each other. I don't like you, Ruth Sr. said bluntly. I don't trust you. I think you're trouble wrapped in a pretty package. Clara said nothing. But... The word came out grudgingly. If Beaumont's making moves, we need all hands, even city hands. She turned and walked back inside without another word. Jake let out a long breath. That's about as close to acceptance as she gets. Clara almost smiled. Progress. Small steps. He looked at her seriously. Clara, I meant what I said. This could get dangerous. You can still change your mind. I won't. Why? The question was genuine searching. You barely know me. You don't owe me anything. Clara looked at her children, then back at Jake. Because for the first time in 2 years, my children feel safe. Because they're eating regular meals and sleeping in real beds and learning to ride horses. Because my son smiled yesterday, Jake. Actually smiled. Her voice thickened. I'll fight for that. I'll fight anyone who tries to take that away. Jake reached out and took her hand, squeezed it once. Then we fight together. Behind them, Tommy stood watching from the porch. His fists were clenched, his jaw set. He'd heard everything, and for the first time he didn't look at Jake with suspicion. He looked at him with something almost like respect. The days after Beaumont's visit settled into an uneasy rhythm. Clara threw herself into the work of the ranch, learning everything Jake would teach her. How to manage the household accounts, how to preserve food for the long winter ahead, how to read the sky for weather signs and the cattle for signs of sickness. Her hands grew rough and her muscles ached, but she welcomed it. Work meant purpose. Purpose meant belonging. The children adapted faster than she'd dared hope. Willie had become Silas's shadow, trailing after the old foreman like a puppy, absorbing everything about horses and cattle with eager intensity. Maggie had taken over the kitchen garden, her methodical mind finding satisfaction in the orderly rows of winter vegetables. Jamie and Sarah spent their days exploring every corner of the ranch, returning each evening with treasures. Bird feathers, interesting rocks, stories of adventures that grew taller with each telling. Even Ruth Sr. had thawed, if only slightly. She still watched Clara with suspicious eyes, still retreated to her room when conversations grew too personal. But she'd started teaching Maggie to knit. Had shown Sarah how to collect eggs without startling the chickens. Small offerings of peace that Clara accepted without comment. Only Tommy remained unchanged. He worked harder than any 11-year-old should. But he kept his distance from Jake, answering questions with single syllables, refusing every attempt at connection. "Give him time," Clara told Jake one evening after Tommy had stalked off to bed without a word. "He's protecting himself. It's how he survives." "I know." Jake stared into the fire. "But I wish he'd let me in, even a little." "You can't force trust, Jake. You have to earn it." "How long does that take?" "As long as it takes." 2 weeks after Beaumont's visit, a rider came with news that changed everything. Clara was hanging laundry behind the house when she heard hoofbeats. She looked up to see a woman approaching on a gray mare riding hard. The woman pulled to a stop in the yard, her face flushed with urgency. "Is Jake Morgan here?" "He's in the barn. What's wrong?" The woman dismounted, and Clara saw she was perhaps 40, with weather-beaten skin and worried eyes. "Mary Ellen Shaw, I own the spread east of here. I need to talk to Jake, now." Jake emerged from the barn before Clara could call him, drawn by the commotion. "Mary Ellen, what's happened?" "Beaumont." The word came out like a curse. "He's buying up notes. Every rancher in the valley who owes the bank money he's calling in their debts, demanding full payment within 30 days. Jake's face went hard. "How many?" "At least 5 that I know of. The Hendersons, the Crawfords, old Thomas Brennan." Mary Ellen's voice shook. "They can't pay Jake. Nobody has that kind of money this time of year. They'll lose everything." Clara felt ice form in her stomach. She'd seen this before. The same tactic Samuel's family had used against her. Legal theft dressed up in respectable clothes. "He's trying to force them out," she said quietly. "Buying up their land cheap when they default." Mary Ellen looked at her sharply. "You're the new wife." "Clara." "She's right," Jake said grimly. "Beaumont's been trying to control the valley for years. This is his play. Force out the small ranchers, consolidate their land, sell to the railroad at a premium." "So what do we do?" Mary Ellen demanded. "Just watch while he steals everything we've built." "No." Jake's voice was firm. "We fight, but we do it smart." He turned to Clara, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Respect. Reliance. "You've got education, Clara. You know about law, about documents. I need you to look at Mary Ellen's loan papers. See if there's anything we can use." Clara nodded without hesitation. "Bring me everything you have." That night, Clara sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, reading by lamplight while the children slept. Loan agreements, mortgage documents, letters from the bank. Her eyes ached and her head throbbed, but she kept reading. Jake sat across from her watching, waiting. "Here." Clara's finger stopped on a line of text. "The original loan agreement specifies 90 days notice before any acceleration of payment, not 30. Meaning Beaumont's violating his own contract. He can't legally demand payment in 30 days. Hope flickered across Jake's face. "That's enough to stop him?" "Maybe, if Mary Ellen contests the demand. If the other ranchers do the same. If we can get it in front of a judge before Beaumont's friends in the sheriff's office force them off their land." "That's a lot of ifs." "It's a chance. More than they had this morning." Jake leaned back. "Where'd you learn all this, the law stuff?" Clara smiled faintly. "My father was a teacher, but his brother was a lawyer. Uncle Robert used to let me read his case files when I was young. Said I had a mind for it." Her smile faded. "He offered to help when Samuel's family threw us out, but he died before he could." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He gave me something more valuable than help. He gave me knowledge." Clara gathered the papers. "I'll write up an argument tonight. Mary Ellen can take it to the territorial judge in Cheyenne. If he rules in her favor, Beaumont's whole scheme falls apart. And if he doesn't..." Clara met his eyes steadily. "Then we find another way. We don't stop fighting until there's nothing left to fight with." Jake stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. "I don't know what I did to deserve you, Clara Thornton, but I'm grateful. You were kind to a woman who expected cruelty. That's rarer than you know." They sat in the lamplight, hands clasped, and something shifted between them. something that had been building since that first day at the train station. Clara felt it in her chest, warm and terrifying. Hope for something more than survival. The back door opened. Ruth Sr. stood in the doorway, her face unreadable. Clara pulled her hand back quickly. "Mrs. Colton, I didn't hear you." "I wasn't trying to be quiet." Ruth Sr.'s eyes moved from Clara to Jake and back again. "I heard you talking. About Beaumont. About fighting back." "Ma, I don't want you to worry." "I'm not worried, I'm angry." Ruth Sr. moved into the kitchen, her spine straight despite her age. "That man killed my husband. Not with a gun or a knife, but with stress and scheming and constant pressure. Thomas Colton died of a heart attack the week after Beaumont made his first offer for this land." Jake went still. "Ma, you never told me." "Because it wouldn't have changed anything. Your father was gone. Dwelling on blame wouldn't bring him back." Ruth Sr.'s voice hardened. "But if there's a chance to stop that snake, I want in. Whatever you're planning, I want to help." Clara stared at the older woman. This was the most Ruth Sr. had said to her since arriving. "Can you write?" Clara asked. "A clear hand, good grammar. I was a school teacher for 15 years before I married." "Then I need you to copy these arguments. We'll send them to every rancher Beaumont is threatening. Give them the tools to fight back." Ruth Sr. nodded once briskly. "Show me what to do." They worked through the night, the three of them. Clara drafted arguments. Ruth Sr. copied them in her elegant schoolteacher's script. Jake rode out before dawn to deliver them personally, unwilling to trust the mail with something this important. By the time the sun rose, 5 ranchers had weapons to fight with. By the time the sun set, Beaumont knew he had a war on his hands. The response came 3 days later. Clara was teaching Maggie to make bread when Tommy burst through the front door, his face white with fear. "Ma, men coming? A lot of them." Clara wiped flour from her hands and ran to the porch. 8 riders were approaching Beaumont at their head. Behind him rode men she didn't recognize, hard-faced and armed. "Get the children inside," she told Maggie. "Now." "Ma." "Now, Margaret." Maggie grabbed Sarah and Jamie, pulling them toward the back of the house. Tommy didn't move. "Tommy, go with your sister." "No." His voice was hard adult. "I ain't hiding." There was no time to argue. The riders had reached the yard. Beaumont dismounted with the casual arrogance of a man who owned everything he surveyed. His eyes found Clara on the porch, and something ugly flickered in them. "Mrs. Thornton, or should I say, Mrs. Colton, I hear congratulations are in order. Mr. Beaumont, you're trespassing." "Am I?" He looked around the yard with exaggerated interest. "I don't see your husband anywhere. Seems careless leaving a woman and children alone with so much trouble in the valley." Clara's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "Jake will be back shortly. With the sheriff." "The sheriff," Beaumont laughed. "The sheriff works for me, Mrs. Colton. Everyone in this valley works for me. Or they will soon enough." He stepped closer to the porch. Tommy moved to block him, his young body taut with desperate courage. "Don't come any closer." Beaumont looked down at the boy with amused contempt. "And what will you do if I do boy hit me with a stick? I'll do what I have to." Something flickered in Beaumont's eyes. Calculation. "Brave little defender. Your mother must be proud." He looked past Tommy to Clara. "I came with a message, Mrs. Colton. The games you've been playing, the legal arguments, the coalition you're building, it ends now." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't insult my intelligence." Beaumont's voice went cold. "I know you're behind those letters. I know you're the one teaching these dirt farmers to fight back. It's clever, I'll admit that. But clever won't save you." He reached into his coat. Clara tensed, ready to throw herself in front of Tommy. But it was just a paper. A document with official-looking seals. "This is a territorial order. The railroad survey has been approved. Construction begins in the spring." Beaumont smiled. "Right through this valley. Through your husband's land. The government will seize what I can't buy, and there's not a lawyer in the territory who can stop it." Clara took the document, read it, felt her stomach drop. It was real, official, devastating. "You'll be compensated, of course. Beaumont continued. Pennies on the dollar, but something. Unless you'd prefer to sell to me now at a fair price and avoid the unpleasantness. Get off my land. The voice came from behind Beaumont. Jake rode into the yard, Silas beside him, rifles visible across their saddles. Behind them came other riders. Mary Ellen Shaw, Thomas Brennan, the Crawford brothers. 5 more ranchers Clara didn't recognize. Beaumont turned slowly. Morgan. Finally decided to show up. I've been busy, talking to neighbors, making plans. Jake dismounted, his eyes never leaving Beaumont. Seems I'm not the only one tired of your games. Games. Beaumont spread his hands. I'm just a businessman, Morgan, trying to help this valley enter the modern age. You're a thief. Always have been. Jake stepped forward. But you miscalculated this time. You thought you could pick us off one by one. Thought we were too scared to fight back. He gestured at the ranchers behind him. We're not scared anymore. Beaumont's smile didn't waver, but Clara saw something tighten in his eyes. Very dramatic. But drama doesn't change facts. The railroad is coming. The survey is approved. You can form all the alliances you want, but progress can't be stopped. Maybe not. But it can be redirected. Jake pulled out a document of his own. This is a petition to the territorial governor, signed by every rancher in this valley, requesting an alternative survey route that doesn't destroy our livelihoods. The governor is a friend of mine. The governor is an elected official who wants to stay in office, and we've sent copies to every newspaper from here to Washington. Jake's voice hardened. How do you think it'll play Beaumont, big Eastern speculators forcing honest ranchers off their land, widows and children thrown into the cold so rich men can get richer? For the first time, Beaumont's confidence flickered. You're making a mistake, Morgan. No, you made the mistake, when you came after my family. Beaumont's eyes moved to Clara, to Tommy still standing rigid on the porch, to the other children's faces visible through the window. This isn't over, he said quietly. No. Jake agreed. But the rules have changed. You want this land, you'll have to go through all of us, together. Beaumont mounted his horse. His men followed, their easy arrogance diminished. Enjoy your victory, Morgan. It won't last. He rode away. His men followed. The dust of their departure hung in the air like a threat. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her legs trembled. She sat down heavily on the porch steps. Jake was beside her instantly. Clara, are you all right? I'm fine. She pressed her hands to her face. I thought he was going to hurt them. The children. I thought... He didn't. He won't. I won't let him. You can't promise that. No. Jake sat beside her. But I can promise I'll die trying to protect them, all of them, you included. Clara looked at him, this man who kept surprising her, who'd taken in 7 strangers and made them his own. I believe you, she whispered. And she did. For the first time in years, she believed someone who made her a promise. Tommy appeared in front of them. His face was pale, his hands shaking, but his eyes were clear. You came back, he said to Jake. You brought help. Of course I did. I thought... Tommy stopped, swallowed hard. I thought you might not. Might decide we weren't worth the trouble. Jake reached out and gripped the boy's shoulder. Listen to me, son. You're not trouble. None of you are. You're family now. And family means I will always come back. No matter what. Tommy stared at him. Something crumbled behind his eyes. All the walls he'd built, all the defenses cracking at last. Pa used to say that. His voice broke. Family means always. He used to say that every night before bed. Then he was a wise man, and he raised a brave son. Tommy's face crumpled. The tears he'd held back for 2 years finally broke free. Jake pulled him into an embrace, holding the sobbing boy against his chest. Clara watched her own tears falling freely. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. Not the legal victories, not the coalition they'd built. This moment right here, when her son finally let himself grieve. Finally let himself trust again. Ruth Sr. appeared in the doorway. For once, her face wasn't hard. She looked at Tommy crying in Jake's arms, at Clara weeping on the porch steps, at the evidence of walls finally coming down. "Well," she said quietly, "about time." She went back inside without another word. But Clara could have sworn she saw tears in the old woman's eyes too. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara found Jake on the front porch. Their spot. Their place for hard conversations and harder truths. "He'll come back," she said quietly. "Beaumont. He won't just accept defeat." "I know." "What do we do?" Jake turned to look at her. In the moonlight, his face was all shadows and plains, beautiful in its roughness. "We keep fighting. We keep building. We make this valley so strong that Beaumont and men like him can't tear it apart. And if that's not enough, then we face whatever comes, together." He reached for her hand. She let him take it. "Clara, I need to tell you something." Her heart stuttered. "What?" "These past weeks watching you fight for this place, for these people. Watching you be a mother and a partner and a warrior all at once." He struggled with the words. "I don't know how to say this right. Just say it. I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the warmth of his hand around hers, the intensity of his gaze. "Jake, you don't have to say anything back. I know it's too soon. I know you've been hurt. I just needed you to know." His voice roughened. "I didn't expect this. When I sent for a wife, I was looking for a partner. Someone to share the work. I never thought I'd find this." Clara looked at him. This man who'd promised her kindness and delivered it every single day. Who'd taken in her children and loved them without hesitation. Who'd fought for strangers because it was right. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I'm scared of feeling this. Scared of losing it." "I know. I'm scared too. What if I can't be what you need? What if I'm too broken?" Jake lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her roughened fingers. "You're not broken, Clara. You're forged. There's a difference." She felt something crack inside her. The last wall. The final defense she'd built around her heart. "I love you too." The words came out small, terrified, true. Jake's face transformed. Joy and disbelief and hope all tangled together. "Clara, I love you," she repeated, stronger now. "I didn't mean to. Didn't want to. But you made it impossible not to." He kissed her then. Soft and gentle and full of promise. Not demanding, just asking. Offering. She kissed him back. Above them, the Montana sky blazed with stars. Around them, the valley slept peacefully. And somewhere in the dark house behind them, 6 children dreamed of horses and adventures, and a future that finally seemed possible. The kiss ended. They stayed close, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. "Whatever comes next," Jake whispered, "we face it together." "Together," Clara agreed. And for the first time since Samuel died, she believed in tomorrow. The peace lasted exactly 11 days. Clara woke to the smell of smoke. She was out of bed before her eyes fully opened, her body moving on pure instinct. Ruth was crying in her cradle. The smell was getting stronger. Wrong. Everything was wrong. "Fire?" Silas's voice roared from somewhere outside. "The barn's on fire!" Clara grabbed Ruth, threw open her door. The hallway was already filling with haze. Tommy was there, pulling Jamie from bed, his face set with terrified determination. "Get everyone out," Clara ordered. "The front door. Now." "Ma, where are you?" "Just go, Tommy. Get your sisters. Go." She ran toward the back of the house where Sarah and Maggie slept. found Maggie already awake, trying to drag a sobbing Sarah toward the door. "Mama!" Sarah screamed, reaching for her. "I've got you, baby. I've got you." Clara shifted Ruth to one arm, grabbed Sarah's hand with the other. "Maggie, stay close. Don't let go." They stumbled through the smoke, eyes burning, lungs screaming. Clara could hear shouts outside, the panicked screaming of horses, the crackle of flames. Ruth Sr. appeared at the kitchen door. Her nightgown singed her face, streaked with soot. "The front's clear," the old woman gasped. "Go. I'll make sure no one's left behind." Clara didn't argue. She pushed through the front door, out into the night, and the scene that greeted her stopped her heart. The barn was an inferno. Flames shot toward the sky, painting everything in hellish orange light. Men ran everywhere, throwing water that did nothing against the blaze. Horses screamed in terror. Cattle bellowed in the distance. And through it all, she couldn't see Jake. "Jake!" Clara screamed. "Jake!" Tommy appeared at her side, Willie and Jamie in tow. "Ma, I can't find him. I can't." A figure emerged from the smoke near the barn. Silas, his face blackened, half carrying another man. Jake. Clara shoved Ruth into Tommy's arms and ran. Her feet were bare, the ground cold and rough, but she didn't care. Didn't feel anything except the desperate need to reach him. "Jake. Jake, please." He was conscious. Coughing violently, his shirt burned through in places, but conscious. His eyes found hers in the chaos. "Clara." His voice was raw, broken. "The horses. I got the horses out. Most of them." "I don't care about the horses." She grabbed his face with both hands, forced him to look at her. "Are you hurt? Are you—" "I'm all right. I'm—" He broke into another coughing fit. Silas lowered him to the ground. "He went in twice," Silas said grimly. "Stupid fool. Barn was already collapsing. Damn near killed himself saving those animals." Clara sank to her knees beside Jake, tears cutting tracks through the soot on her face. "Don't you ever do that again. Don't you dare. Had to." Jake's hand found hers, gripped it weakly. "Those horses are everything. Our livelihood. Our future. You're our future. You think I care about horses if you're dead?" He looked at her, then really looked, and something passed between them. Understanding. Fear. Love so fierce it hurt. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry." Clara kissed him. Right there in the dirt and chaos, with their world burning around them, she kissed him like it might be the last time. The barn burned until dawn. By morning light, the damage was clear. The barn was gone, nothing but smoldering timbers and ash. They'd lost 2 horses despite Jake's efforts. The winter feed stores were destroyed. The equipment, the tack, the wagon, all of it consumed by flames. But the house still stood. The family was alive. And when Clara counted her children in the gray morning light, all 6 were accounted for. "Beaumont." Jake's voice was flat, deadly. He stood staring at what remained of his barn, his hands clenched into fists. This was Beaumont. Can you prove it? Mary Ellen Shaw had ridden over at first light, alerted by the glow visible for miles. Other ranchers were arriving now, their faces grim. "Don't need to prove it. I know." "Jake." Clara touched his arm. "We have to be smart about this. If we accuse him without proof, I don't care about proof." Jake whirled on her, and for the first time she saw fury in his eyes. Real fury, hot and dangerous. "He could have killed you. All of you. The children." His voice broke. He turned away, shoulders shaking. Clara moved to him, wrapped her arms around him from behind. Felt the tremors running through his body, rage and fear and grief all tangled together. "We're alive," she said quietly. "We're all alive. That's what matters. This is my fault. I brought this on you. If I'd just sold, then he would have won. And other families would have suffered. And everything you've fought for would mean nothing." Clara forced him to turn to face her. "You are not responsible for another man's evil, Jake. Beaumont made this choice, not you." "She's right." Thomas Brennan stepped forward, his weathered face hard. We all made the choice to stand together. We knew there'd be consequences. I didn't know the consequences would fall on my family. They've fallen on all our families. Mary Ellen's voice was steady. My fence lines were cut last week. The Crawfords found their water supply poisoned. We've all been paying the price. Jake looked at the gathered ranchers, men and women he'd convinced to fight, people who'd trusted him. Then what do we do? How do we stop a man who'll burn our homes while we sleep? Silence fell over the group. Clara felt the weight of it, the despair, the helplessness. They were up against a man with unlimited resources and no conscience. We don't stop him. The voice came from an unexpected source. Ruth Sr. standing on the scorched porch, her face set with determination. We outlast him. Everyone turned to look at the old woman. I've been in this valley for 40 years, Ruth Sr. continued. I've seen droughts and blizzards and plagues. I've buried a husband and a grandchild, and I'm still standing. Her voice hardened. Men like Beaumont, they think they can break us because they don't understand what we're made of. They see dirt farmers and widows and figure we'll fold at the first sign of trouble. She stepped down from the porch, walking toward the group with a dignity that belied her years. We're not going to fold. We're going to rebuild. We're going to help each other. And when spring comes and the railroad survey team arrives, we're going to show them a valley full of people who refuse to be moved. Clara stared at her mother-in-law. This woman who'd resented her from the first day, who'd fought against this marriage, this family. Mrs. Colton, Ruth. The old woman met Clara's eyes. You've earned the right to call me Ruth. Something cracked in Clara's chest. She felt tears threaten again. Ruth, thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't let that bastard win. Despite everything, the smoking ruins, the fear, the uncertainty, Clara felt something like hope stir in her chest. They weren't alone. They had each other. And sometimes that was enough. The next weeks were brutal. They lived in the house, all of them, while the men worked to build a temporary shelter for the surviving horses. Jake drove himself relentlessly, barely sleeping, barely eating, consumed by the need to rebuild what Beaumont had destroyed. Clara worked alongside him, doing whatever needed doing. She learned to swing a hammer, to mix mortar, to carry timber, until her arms screamed. Her fine Boston hands became calloused and rough, and she didn't care. The children helped too. Even little Jamie carried tools and fetched water. Tommy worked like a man twice his age. His earlier resentment toward Jake transformed into fierce loyalty. They were a family now, forged in fire, and nothing could break them. Other ranchers came when they could, bringing supplies, lending hands. Mary Ellen brought food. Thomas Brennan brought lumber from his own stores. The Crawford brothers brought a horse to replace one of the ones they'd lost. We take care of our own, old Thomas said when Jake tried to protest. You'd do the same for us. It was true. He would. Beaumont, meanwhile, had gone quiet. No more visits, no more threats. The silence was almost worse than the aggression. Clara found herself jumping at shadows, lying awake at night, listening for the sound of approaching hooves. He's planning something, she told Jake one night as they sat by the fire. He's too quiet. I know. Been thinking the same thing. What do we do? Jake stared into the flames. His face was gaunt with exhaustion, but his eyes were clear. We keep building, keep getting stronger, and we don't give him any excuse to come at us again. And if he comes anyway, then we fight. Same as we've been fighting. Clara leaned against his shoulder, felt his arm come around her, pulling her close. I love you, she whispered. Have I said that today? Once or twice, but I don't mind hearing it again. I love you, Jake Colton. More than I ever thought I could love anyone again. He kissed the top of her head. I love you too, Clara. You and every one of those children. You're my family now. My whole world. They sat in silence, drawing strength from each other. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall. The blizzard came 3 days later. Clara had never experienced anything like it. The wind howled like a living thing, tearing at the house, piling snow against doors and windows. Temperatures dropped until the cold seemed to have teeth biting through every layer of clothing, every crack in the walls. They huddled together in the main room, all of them. Jake and Clara, Ruth Sr., Silas, who'd refused to go back to the bunkhouse. The children, wrapped in every blanket they owned, clustered around the fireplace. "How long will it last?" Maggie asked, her voice small. "Hard to say." Jake fed another log into the fire. "Could be hours, could be days." "Days?" Willie's eyes went wide. "We'll freeze." "We won't freeze." Clara pulled him closer. "We've got plenty of wood, plenty of food. We just have to wait it out." "Your ma's right." Jake settled beside them, and Clara felt the children lean toward him, seeking comfort. "I've been through storms like this before. The trick is staying calm, staying warm, and trusting that it'll pass." "Tell us a story," Jamie demanded. "A good one." Jake glanced at Clara. She nodded encouragingly. "All right." He shifted, getting comfortable. "Did I ever tell you about the time my father caught a mountain lion with nothing but a rope and a bad attitude?" "No." Multiple voices clamored. Even Ruth Sr. leaned in, a faint smile on her lips. Jake began to talk. His voice wove through the howling wind, painting pictures of adventure and courage. The children listened with rapt attention, fear forgotten in the magic of storytelling. Clara watched him, watched her family, this impossible patchwork family that had somehow become real. Tommy was pressed against Jake's side, no longer holding himself apart. Sarah sat in Ruth Sr.'s lap, the old woman's arms wrapped protectively around her. Maggie was taking mental notes, probably planning to write the story down later. Willie and Jamie were wide-eyed with excitement, and baby Ruth slept peacefully in her cradle, oblivious to the storm. This is what we were fighting for, Clara thought. This moment, this warmth, this love. Beaumont could burn their barns and threaten their livelihoods. The weather could rage against them. The world could throw everything it had at them. But this was unbreakable. The storm lasted 2 days. When it finally ended, the world was transformed. Snow lay in drifts taller than the children, glittering in the weak winter sun. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe, but the wind had died, leaving an eerie silence. Jake and Silas dug their way out, immediately checking on the horses and the few cattle they'd kept close to the house. Clara watched from the window, Ruth on her hip, as they moved through the frozen landscape. "They're all alive," Jake reported when he returned, stamping snow from his boots. "Cold and hungry, but alive." "Thank God." Clara sagged with relief. "We need supplies, though. The storm used up most of our wood, and we're running low on feed. I'll have to make a run to town once the roads are passable." "How long?" "Day or two, maybe. Depends on how fast the snow melts." Clara nodded. She'd learned to accept the rhythms of frontier life, the waiting, the uncertainty, the constant adaptation. "I'll make a list of what we need." "That's my practical wife." Jake kissed her cheek. Always thinking ahead. Wife. They'd been married in the eyes of the law since she arrived, but it was only now that the word felt real. They hadn't had a ceremony, hadn't exchanged vows in any church, but somewhere in the fire and snow and struggle, they'd become truly married. 2 days later, Jake rode for town. Clara stood on the porch, watching him disappear over the ridge, Tommy at her side. "He'll be back," Tommy said quietly. "He promised." "I know. Do you believe him?" Clara looked at her son, at the boy who'd been so determined not to trust, not to hope, now standing here defending Jake's honor. "Yes," she said. "I believe him." Tommy nodded. Something had settled in him over the past weeks. The anger was still there, buried deep, but it had found a new target. Not Jake, not the world. Just Beaumont and men like him. "When I'm older," Tommy said, "I'm going to make sure nobody can hurt us. Nobody." "Tommy." "I mean it, Ma. I'm going to learn everything. How to fight. How to build. How to protect people." His young jaw set with determination. "I'm going to be like Jake. Strong enough that nobody messes with what's mine." Clara's heart clenched. She wanted to tell him he didn't need to carry that burden, that he was just a child, that protecting the family wasn't his responsibility. But she knew he wouldn't listen, and part of her understood. He'd watched his father die, watched his family get thrown out like garbage. He needed to feel powerful again. "Jake would be proud to hear you say that," she said instead. "You think so?" "I know so." Tommy almost smiled. "I'm going to go check on the horses. Silas said he'd teach me how to check their hooves for damage." He ran off young again for just a moment. Clara watched him go, her heart full of love and sorrow and fierce, desperate hope. Jake returned the next afternoon, but he wasn't alone. Clara heard the wagon approaching and went to the porch expecting to see supplies. Instead, she saw Jake driving, his face grim, and beside him a woman she didn't recognize. Behind the wagon rode 3 men on horseback, and in the wagon bed huddled 2 small children. "Clara." Jake pulled the wagon to a stop. "This is Martha Henderson. Her husband was killed last night. Beaumont's men." Clara's blood went cold. "Killed?" "Shot him in his own barn. Made it look like a robbery, but everyone knows." Jake's voice was tight with controlled fury. "Martha and the children had nowhere to go. I brought them here." Martha Henderson looked up. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. But underneath the grief, Clara saw something familiar. The same look she'd worn stepping off that train. Desperate, terrified, determined to survive. "Mrs. Colton." Martha's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry to impose. I didn't know where else." "You're not imposing." Clara stepped down from the porch, moving toward the wagon. "You're welcome here, for as long as you need." "My husband," Martha's voice cracked. "He was going to testify against Beaumont about the illegal seizures. He had documents, proof." "Shh, don't think about that now." Clara helped the woman down from the wagon. "Let's get you and your children inside. Warm food, warm beds. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." Martha clutched her hand. "Why? You don't even know me. Why would you?" "Because it's right." Clara met the woman's eyes steadily. "Because we take care of each other out here. Because Beaumont wants us afraid and alone, and I refuse to give him that satisfaction." She led Martha inside Ruth Sr., already moving to prepare food, the children emerging to stare at the newcomers with curious eyes. Jake stayed outside with the men, other ranchers, Clara realized. Members of their alliance come to discuss what Henderson's murder meant for all of them. The meeting lasted hours. Clara listened from the kitchen, keeping Martha company, learning her story. Henderson had been gathering evidence of Beaumont's illegal land seizures for months. He'd been planning to take it to the territorial governor, to the newspapers, to anyone who would listen. Now he was dead, and the evidence had disappeared. "He hid copies," Martha said suddenly, her voice stronger than it had been. "James was careful. He knew Beaumont might try something. He told me if anything happened to him, there were copies, hidden somewhere safe." Clara leaned forward. "Do you know where?" "No. He said it was better if I didn't. Said Beaumont might try to force it out of me." Martha's hands trembled. "But he told me someone else knew. Someone he trusted." "Who?" "Your husband. James said he'd told Jake Colton where to find the evidence, just in case." Clara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Jake knew. Jake had evidence that could bring Beaumont down, and he'd never said a word. She stood abruptly. "Stay here. Watch the children." She found Jake on the porch, the other ranchers just leaving. He looked exhausted, defeated, older than his years. "Jake." He turned. Something in her face must have warned him. "Martha told me. About the evidence. About James telling you where it was hidden." Jake closed his eyes. "Clara, you knew. This whole time you knew there was proof of what Beaumont's done, and you didn't tell me. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Clara's voice rose. "A man is dead, Jake. His widow and children are sitting in our kitchen. And you had evidence that could have stopped. This could have stopped all of it. And gotten us killed right along with Henderson." Jake's control snapped. You think I don't know? You think I haven't been torn apart every single day, knowing I could end this, but being too afraid of what it would cost? He stepped toward her, his eyes wild with pain. The night of the fire, Beaumont sent a message, with his men. Said if I used what Henderson gave me, he'd make what happened to our barn look like a church social. Said he'd burn the house with everyone in it. With you. With the children. Clara felt the ground shift beneath her. He said if I kept quiet, stayed out of his way, he'd leave us alone. Said Henderson was a warning of what happens to people who fight him. Jake's voice broke. So I kept quiet. I let that man die. And I didn't tell you because I couldn't bear to see you look at me the way you're looking at me right now. Clara stared at him. This man she loved. This man who'd taken in her family, protected them, built a life with them. This man who'd made an impossible choice. You should have told me, she whispered. I know. We're supposed to be partners. We're supposed to face things together. I know. Tears streaked Jake's face. I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. Clara stood frozen. Part of her wanted to rage at him. Part of her understood completely. What would she have done faced with the same choice: watch her children burn, or let a good man die? She didn't know, couldn't know, and that terrified her. The evidence, she said finally. Where is it? Hidden in the old mill 5 miles north. Henderson put it there a month ago, gave me a map. Then we use it. Jake stared at her. Clara, you heard what I said. Beaumont has already done his worst. He's burned our barn, killed our friend, terrorized our neighbors. Clara's voice hardened into something like steel. What else is he going to take from us? We can't live like this, Jake, cowering, afraid, letting him pick us off one by one. If we use that evidence, he'll come for us. Then let him come. Clara stepped forward, took his face in her hands. I would rather die fighting than live on my knees. I thought you felt the same. Jake looked at her, really looked, and slowly something shifted in his eyes. The despair giving way to something else, determination. You're right, he said quietly. You're right, and I've been a coward. You've been human. There's a difference. Clara kissed him softly. Now let's finish this, together. Jake nodded, took her hand. Together they walked back into the house, back to Martha Henderson and her fatherless children, back to the family waiting inside, back to war. They rode out before dawn. Jake led the way, Clara beside him, Silas and Thomas Brennan following close behind. The world was still dark, the air bitter cold, but Clara felt nothing except the fierce determination burning in her chest. The old mill stood 5 miles north, abandoned for years, its wooden walls sagging with age and neglect. Jake dismounted first, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of ambush. Stay close, he said quietly. Brennan watched the road. Silas, you're with me. Clara followed them inside. The mill smelled of rot and dust, years of decay pressing down on every surface. Jake moved to the far corner, counting steps, and knelt beside a loose floorboard. Here. He pried it up, revealing a metal box buried in the earth beneath. Clara held her breath as he opened it. Papers. Dozens of them. Letters, contracts, bank records. Evidence of every illegal deal Beaumont had made, every family he'd cheated, every law he'd broken. James Henderson was thorough. Clara breathed, flipping through the documents. This is everything. Enough to put Beaumont away for years. If we can get it to someone who'll use it. Jake's voice was grim. The sheriff's in Beaumont's pocket, the local judge too. Then we go higher, the territorial governor, the federal marshal in Cheyenne. Clara's mind was already working. We make copies, send them everywhere, to newspapers, to politicians, to anyone who'll listen. Make it impossible for Beaumont to silence us. Jake looked at her. You know what this means. Once we do this, there's no going back. He'll come for us with everything he has. Let him come. They returned to the ranch as the sun rose, the evidence secured in Clara's saddlebag. The other ranchers were waiting gathered in the yard, their faces tense with anticipation. "Well," Mary Ellen demanded, "did you find it?" "We found it." Jake dismounted, helping Clara down. "Enough to bury Beaumont 10 times over." A murmur ran through the crowd. Hope, finally. Real hope. "What now?" Thomas Brennan asked. Clara stepped forward. "Now we make copies. As many as we can. And we send them to everyone. The governor. The newspapers in Denver and San Francisco. The railroad company's board of directors. Anyone who has reason to want Beaumont stopped." "That'll take time." Mary Ellen's voice was worried. "Beaumont won't just sit back which is why we need to move fast." Clara looked at the gathered faces. "I'll need help. Anyone who can write, anyone who can ride. We have to get this done before Beaumont realizes what we're doing." The ranchers exchanged glances. Then one by one they nodded. "I can write," old Thomas Brennan said. "My wife too." "My boy can ride faster than anyone in the territory," the Crawford brothers offered. "I'll go to Denver myself," Mary Ellen said firmly. "Got a cousin there who works for the newspaper. He'll print whatever I give him." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. These people, these stubborn, brave, beautiful people. "Thank you," she whispered. "All of you." "Don't thank us yet." Jake's voice was steady, but Clara heard the emotion beneath it. "We've got a war to win first." The next 2 days were a blur of activity. The ranch became a command center, people coming and going at all hours. Ruth Sr. took charge of the children, keeping them fed and occupied while the adults worked. Martha Henderson emerged from her grief to help copy documents, her hands steady, her eyes burning with the need for justice. Clara worked until her fingers cramped, writing the same damning words over and over. Evidence of fraud. Evidence of bribery. Evidence of murder. Each copy was a weapon, and she was arming an army. On the second night, Jake found her asleep at the kitchen table, her head pillowed on a stack of papers. He lifted her gently, carried her to their room. "Put me down," she mumbled. "I'm not finished. You're exhausted. The papers will be there in the morning." "Morning might be too late. Morning will be fine." Jake laid her on the bed, pulled a blanket over her. "You can't fight if you're dead on your feet." Clara grabbed his hand before he could leave. "Stay. Please." He hesitated only a moment before lying down beside her, pulling her close. They lay in the darkness, holding each other, drawing strength from the simple fact of being together. "I'm scared," Clara admitted quietly. "I've been pretending I'm not, but I am. Terrified." "Me too." "What if this doesn't work? What if Beaumont wins anyway?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "Then we'll have gone down fighting. Together. That's worth something." "Is it worth our children's future? Their lives?" "Clara." Jake shifted to look at her, his face barely visible in the darkness. "Those children have a mother who crossed a continent to save them, who lied and fought and sacrificed everything. They've got a father who would die before letting anyone hurt them. Whatever happens, they know they're loved. They know what courage looks like. That's a legacy no one can take away." Clara felt tears slide down her cheeks. "When did you get so wise?" "Somewhere between the fire and the blizzard. Desperation does that to a man." She laughed, wet and shaky. "I love you." "I love you too. Now sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hell." It was. The riders went out at first light, carrying copies of the evidence in every direction. Mary Ellen headed for Denver. Thomas Brennan's son rode for Cheyenne. The Crawford brothers split up, one going east, one going west. By noon, Beaumont knew. Clara was in the yard when she saw them coming. A dust cloud on the horizon growing larger, resolving into riders. A lot of riders. At least 20, maybe more. "Jake!" she screamed. "They're coming!" Chaos erupted. Men grabbed rifles. Women gathered children. Jake appeared at Clara's side, his face set in hard lines. "Get everyone in the house. Now." "I'm not leaving you." "Clara." I said no. She grabbed a rifle from the stack by the door, checked that it was loaded. We fight together or not at all. Jake looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. All right. Stay behind cover. Don't take unnecessary risks. They took positions around the ranch. Jake on the porch, Silas by the barn. Thomas Brennan and the other ranchers spread out in a defensive line. Clara crouched behind the water trough, her rifle steady, despite the terror coursing through her veins. The riders arrived in a thunder of hooves and dust. Beaumont was at their head, his face twisted with rage. He rode straight into the yard, stopping just short of the porch where Jake stood waiting. Morgan, Beaumont's voice was ice. You've made a very serious mistake. Only mistake I ever made was not doing this sooner. You think those papers will save you, those letters you've been sending? Beaumont laughed harsh and ugly. I own the telegraph operator. Every message you've sent I've intercepted. Every rider you've dispatched I've stopped. Clara's stomach dropped. No, it couldn't be true. You're lying. Jake's voice was steady, but Clara saw his hand tighten on his rifle. Am I? Beaumont gestured, and two of his men rode forward, dragging someone between them. A young man beaten and bloody. Thomas Brennan's son, Jacob. The old rancher started forward, but Silas grabbed his arm, held him back. Found this one halfway to Cheyenne, Beaumont said casually. The others have been similarly delayed. Your little rebellion ends here, Morgan. Now. Clara's mind raced. If Beaumont had intercepted everything, if their messengers were captured, then all of this had been for nothing. All the work, all the risk, you're wrong. The voice came from behind Beaumont, from the ridge overlooking the ranch. Clara turned, and her heart stopped. Riders were appearing on the horizon. Not Beaumont's men. Others, dozens of them. And at their head, a woman on a gray mare. Mary Ellen Shaw. You caught most of them, Mary Ellen called down, her voice carrying clearly in the tense silence. But not me. I didn't take the main road. I didn't go to Denver. She urged her horse forward, riding down into the yard. Behind her came men Clara didn't recognize, hard-faced, official-looking, wearing badges. I went to Fort Laramie, Mary Ellen continued. To the federal marshal there, the one who's been investigating land fraud in the territories for the past 2 years. Beaumont's face went white. Henry Beaumont. One of the badge-wearing men rode forward. His voice was flat official. You're under arrest for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to... Beaumont's hand went to his gun. Everything happened at once. Jake's rifle came up. Clara screamed a warning. Beaumont's men went for their weapons. The marshal's deputies responded in kind. A shot rang out, then another, and another. Clara found herself firing without thinking, the rifle kicking against her shoulder. She saw men fall, saw horses rear, saw chaos and smoke and violence. And then suddenly, silence. Beaumont lay on the ground, his gun still in his hand, a red stain spreading across his chest. Around him, his men were surrendering, throwing down weapons, hands in the air. It was over. Clara lowered her rifle. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She looked around frantically, searching for Jake. He stood on the porch, untouched. His eyes found hers across the yard. Clara. His voice broke on her name. She ran to him, threw herself into his arms. He held her so tight she couldn't breathe, and she didn't care. It's over, he kept saying. It's over. We won. Behind them, the children spilled out of the house. Tommy first, then Maggie, then Willie and Sarah and Jamie. Baby Ruth wailed in Ruth Sr.'s arms. They crashed into their parents in a tangle of arms and tears and desperate relief. Mama! Sarah was crying. Mama, I was so scared. I know, baby. I know, but it's all right now. We're safe. Is the bad man gone? Jamie asked, his small face streaked with tears. Jake crouched down, gathered the boy into his arms. The bad man's gone, son. He's never going to hurt anyone again. Because you stopped him. Because we all stopped him. Together. The federal marshal approached, his face grim but satisfied. "Mr. Colton, Mrs. Colton, we'll need statements from everyone, and those documents you mentioned." "You'll have them," Clara said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her limbs. "Every last page." The marshal nodded. "What you did here today, it took courage. A lot of families are going to be safe because of you." Clara looked at Jake, at her children, at the gathered ranchers who'd risked everything to stand together. "We just did what neighbors do," she said quietly. "We took care of each other." The cleanup took weeks. Beaumont's organization crumbled without him. His associates were arrested. His illegal deals unwound, his victims compensated. The railroad survey was rerouted just as Jake had hoped, going around the valley rather than through it. The Henderson evidence proved invaluable. James Henderson, even in death, had saved the valley he loved. Martha stayed at the ranch through the spring until she felt ready to start again. Then she bought a small place of her own, determined to build a new life for herself and her children. The alliance Jake and Clara had built remained strong. Monthly meetings at the ranch became a tradition. Problems were shared, solutions found, community strengthened. The valley that Beaumont had tried to tear apart instead grew closer than ever. Spring came slowly then, all at once. Clara stood on the porch watching her children play in the yard. Willie was trying to teach Jamie to ride with predictably chaotic results. Maggie was reading under a tree. Her constant companion these days, a notebook where she wrote stories about frontier life. Sarah was collecting wildflowers, her shyness finally beginning to fade. Tommy was with Jake in the corral learning to break horses, his young body strong and capable. And baby Ruth, now walking, toddled across the grass with Ruth Sr. following close behind, the old woman's face, soft with an affection Clara had never thought to see. "Penny, for your thoughts." Jake appeared beside her, his arm sliding around her waist. He smelled like horses and sweat and home. "Just thinking about how far we've come." Clara leaned into him. "A year ago I was on a train, terrified of what waited at the end of the line. And now I can't imagine being anywhere else." Jake kissed her temple. "I've been thinking about making things official." Clara turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" "We're married legally, have been since you arrived, but we never had a real wedding, never stood up in front of people and made promises." His voice was soft, uncertain. "I'd like to do that, if you want. Show everyone what we've built, what we mean to each other." Clara felt her heart swell. "You want to marry me again? I want to marry you properly, with the children there, with our friends, with everything we've fought for standing witness." He took her hands. "What do you say, Clara Thornton Colton? Will you make an honest man of me?" She laughed, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He kissed her, then right there on the porch in full view of everyone. The children cheered. Ruth Sr. pretended to disapprove while smiling. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out, circling on the warm spring air. The wedding took place in June. The whole valley came, ranchers and townspeople, and everyone who'd stood with them through the dark times. Eleanor Thornton, the schoolteacher. Clara had started helping perform the ceremony in the yard of the ranch under a canopy of wildflowers. Clara wore a simple white dress sewn by Ruth Sr.'s own hands. Jake wore his best suit, the one he'd been married in before, now altered to fit his broader frame. The children stood with them. All 6 of them scrubbed clean and dressed in their finest. Tommy held baby Ruth. Maggie held the rings. Willie couldn't stop fidgeting. Jamie kept asking when they could eat cake. Sarah clutched her bouquet of wildflowers like a lifeline. "We're gathered here today," Eleanor began, "to witness something rare and beautiful. The joining of 2 lives that have already been tested by fire. The celebration of a family built not by blood, but by choice, by courage, by love." Clara looked at Jake, saw tears glittering in his eyes. "Jacob Colton," Eleanor continued, "do you take this woman to be your wife? To love her, honor her, and cherish her in good times and bad for as long as you both shall live?" "I do." Jake's voice was steady, sure. "I've been doing that since the day she stepped off that train. Reckon I'll keep doing it till my last breath." "And Clara Thornton Colton, do you take this man to be your husband? To love him, honor him, and cherish him in good times and bad, for as long as you both shall live?" Clara's voice came out strong and clear. "I do. He promised me kindness when I expected cruelty. He's kept that promise every single day. I'm proud to be his wife. Prouder than I can say." Eleanor smiled. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Again." She winked. "You may kiss your bride." Jake kissed her, long and deep and full of promise. The crowd erupted in cheers. The children mobbed them, hugging and laughing and crying all at once. "We're really a family now," Jamie announced loudly. "For real and forever." "For real and forever," Jake agreed, his voice thick with emotion. Clara looked at her family, her husband, her children, her mother-in-law who'd gone from enemy to ally to something very like a mother, her friends, her community, her home. A year ago she'd had nothing, no hope, no future, just 6 hungry children and a lie that was supposed to save them. Now she had everything. That night, after the guests had gone and the children were asleep, Clara and Jake stood on their porch, their spot. The place where so many hard conversations had happened and so many tender ones. "Happy?" Jake asked softly. "Beyond measure." "Any regrets?" Clara thought about it, really thought. 1. I wish Samuel could see how well his children turned out. How brave and strong and kind they are. "He knows." Jake pulled her close. "Wherever he is, he knows. And I think he'd be grateful that his family found a home, that they're loved." "You really believe that?" "I have to, because I'd want the same thing if it was me. I'd want to know that Elizabeth would be happy again, that life goes on." He kissed her forehead. "That's what love is, isn't it? Wanting the other person to be happy, even if you can't be there to see it." Clara nodded against his chest. "I love you, Jake. I love you too, Clara. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it." They stood in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. The same stars that had watched over this valley for thousands of years. The same stars that would watch over it for thousands more. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully. Tommy, who'd finally learned to trust again. Maggie, who'd found her voice and her purpose. Willie, who'd discovered that hard work could be its own reward. Sarah, who was slowly emerging from her shell. Jamie, who'd forgotten what it was like to be hungry. And baby Ruth, who would grow up knowing nothing but love. A year ago, Clara had stepped off a train expecting a monster. Instead, she'd found a man who'd looked at her frightened eyes and said the only words that mattered. "I'll be kind to you." He'd kept that promise, every single day. Through fire and snow and war and loss. Through fear and doubt and impossible odds. He'd been kind. And kindness, Clara had learned, was the strongest thing in the world. The wind whispered through the valley, carrying the scent of wildflowers and new grass. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled. The horses shifted in the new barn built by neighbors who'd become family. The cattle lowed softly in the distant pastures. Life went on. Beautiful and harsh and full of possibility. Clara closed her eyes and let herself believe in tomorrow. Not because it was safe. Not because it was easy. Because she'd found something worth fighting for. Because she'd found home. And home, she finally understood, wasn't a place. It was the people who loved you. The ones who stood beside you when the world tried to tear you apart. It was 6 children sleeping safely in their beds. It was an old woman who'd learned to open her heart again. It was a community that took care of its own. It was a man who'd promised kindness and delivered it day after day, until kindness became love. Clara Thornton had arrived in Wyoming with nothing but desperation and lies. Clara Colton would spend the rest of her life here surrounded by truth and love and the family she'd built from ashes. She'd expected a monster. She'd found a home,